Hi everyone! Well, today we're going to talk about kale. If your kale is looking a little bit raggedy and you're getting ready to pull it out, don't pull it out, but rather prune it back and it will keep on growing. Now, kale is one of those amazing superfoods. Not only is it super tasty and really good for you, we absolutely love to eat kale in smoothies, but it's very easy to grow. It's cold tolerant, it'll take a frost, and it's also heat tolerant. So it's a great green to grow in the hot weather. Now, I just planted some fresh kale transplants that I started from seed indoors in this container right behind me here over the weekend, and I also planted some seeds. So it's so easy to grow. Start from seed indoors, plant seed directly in your garden beds. Now this kale behind me here is looking pretty good, but let's head out to the garden and I'll show you some kale that's not looking so good and definitely needs a little pruning. You ready to go, Mac? Let's go. This kale right here is the blue Scotch curled kale from my heat tolerant greens collection. And this one is actually not looking too bad. You can see there's some of the yellowing leaves on the bottom and it is starting to go to seed, but there are a ton of aphids on top. Aphids really like the kale. Now, one thing you can do if you do get aphids is just spray it off with a nice strong burst of water from your hose. Kale is super sturdy and hardy, and a little spray of water is not going to hurt it at all. And it'll wash off the aphids, and then hopefully the aphids won't climb back up. So you may need to come out and do this every day or so until the aphids are gone. And then if that doesn't take care of it, you can always apply some neem oil. So let's head out to the garden now and take a look at the kale that's in really bad shape. Now, if you are looking for a heat-tolerant green to grow in the summer, kale is definitely the one for you. I have a couple different varieties in my heat-tolerant green seed collection, so head over to my website and pick some up. Now, it's not like lettuce, which bolts when the weather gets over 75 or 80 degrees, and then it's really not much good for eating anymore. Kale will take the heat. And the kale in this garden bed right behind me here, I've had growing for probably close to 2 years now. But you can see it is looking pretty shabby. Now, some people email me and say, do your greens ever look bad? And I'm showing you guys how bad this kale looks right now. The leaves are really drying out at the bottom. I mean, it's really run its course. It's bolting here. Flowers are starting to develop. And you can see there are a ton of aphids on here as well. So we better get busy and breathe some new life into this kale by pruning it back. So if your kale looks like this, don't pull it, let's prune it. So basically what I'm going to do here is just cut all this kale off right at the base of the plant. And the cool thing is after about a week or so, you're going to see new little baby leaves emerging, which is a lot of fun because the little baby leaves on kale are the sweetest and they make delicious salads and they're absolutely amazing to throw into smoothies. So you want to trim back your kale once it starts to bolt or shoot up this tall flower stalk right in the middle there. So I'm just clipping it off at the base. And if your kale is growing very nicely, you can also just trim off the bottom leaves, but you can see this kale is looking really bad. So I am just going to cut the whole thing completely off. It's going to look so good and breathe fresh new life into these plants. This is a humongous plant. Now, trimming is always really hard for me to do because I love to see the plants grow and it always looks so bare after it's trimmed, don't you think? But this one is not going to look any better if I leave it in. So I'm excited to get it trimmed back and all the wonderful, delicious new kale that will be growing. It's going to be so good in my smoothies. I don't know if you're a smoothie lover like I am, but the kale has such a good flavor to the smoothies. And I like to make it with homemade yogurt and make my yogurt in the Instant Pot and then throw in some mixed berries. It covers up the kale flavor that some people don't like. And I can even fool my kids and camera guy into drinking green smoothies by adding in the mixed frozen berries. It's so delicious and refreshing, especially on a hot day. So I'm just going to cut these stems back a little bit further here. The stems are really thick and heavy, and you do want to cut them back as far as you can. That way your plant, when it regrows, is not too top heavy and lanky. You're going to want to use a nice sharp pair of pruners for this too, as these stems are pretty thick. I'm also going to pull out all the dried kale leaves. Now because this kale has a ton of aphids on it, I'm not going to throw it in the compost pile. I'm going to throw it in the green trash can. But if you are pulling out kale that it's not infested with bugs, you can definitely compost the leaves that you pull out. Well, I've got a big old bucket now of kale prunings to get rid of, and I did not realize that all of this came from one single plant. So you can see kale can grow pretty large, especially when it's grown here for about 2 years. Now it's looking really, really good. What I'm gonna do now though, because it definitely needs some replenishing, the soil does. So I'm gonna add some vermistera worm castings to add some extra nutrients to the soil. So I'm sure it's really depleted after growing here for 2 years. And worm castings will really bring in the beneficial bacteria and microbes, really get the soil pumping again, get the kale plant growing again, some good organic nutrients to the soil. And I'm also going to give it a really nice dose of some fertilizer that's high in nitrogen, because nitrogen promotes that leafy growth. We definitely want to get these leaves growing again. So I'm giving it the Good Dirt plant food, which I've used in my garden now for about a year or so. I swear it works almost immediately. I'm going to spray this on and give it that good nitrogen that this kale plant needs and really get it growing again. I cannot wait to see this new growth, and I'll definitely come back in a few weeks and let you guys know how it goes. Well, comment below if you have a kale plant that's not looking so good and you've been tempted to pull it out. What I want you to do is go and prune it and then come back later and tell me how it goes. Well, if you're looking for a really good heat-tolerant green to grow this summer, I would definitely recommend kale. Grab yourself one of the heat-tolerant green seed collections over on my website. Plant some kale, also has chard in there, New Zealand spinach, and a heat-tolerant variety of lettuce. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video.